So today we're going to cover METT-TC. What is it? Why is it important? What is METT-TC? METT-TC is an acronym used by U.S. military leaders to remember considerations in planning any operation. And that could be an operations order, a warning order, or a FRAGO. Op orders are usually about 5 paragraphs, could take days or even weeks to complete, depending on intelligence in the area. Right? And then a warning order is going to be a brief summary of said op ord disseminated down to lower level troops. And a FRAGO is going to be a short order or an amended order or an amendment to a pre-existing order. What does the acronym stand for? That acronym stands for mission, enemy, troops and support, time, terrain and weather, and civilian considerations, right? So the mission is going to be, what are we doing? Enemy is going to be active intelligence on the enemy, which is a full salute report down here. That's size, activity, location, unit or uniform, time, and equipment. All this stuff is pretty self-explanatory. I may do a video in the future on how to put together a proper salute report, but you want to be able to determine the size of the enemy, the activity that they're doing, location that they're at, 8 or 10 digit grid, unit they're part of, and uniform they're wearing, the time they're on the objective and how long they're going to be there, how long you have to conduct that operation, and the equipment that they have readily available to them, right? So all that's going to be wrapped up into an accurate, intelligent report, right? And we got troops and support, friendly units that are available. The key word is available. You want to make sure that when you're factoring METT-TC, you only use assets that are available to you. You can't call in airstrikes if you don't have air support, right? Can't call in artillery if you don't have artillery support or it's not available. Let's say that artillery is only available at a certain time or air is only available at a certain time. Well, if it's not available, you ain't got it, period. Look at Mogadishu, Black Hawk Down, Operation Gothic Serpent. They were supposed to have a C-130 available. Well, guess what? They did not have an AC-130 available to provide support, and the operation was done during the day when most of the SOAR pilots were supposed to fly at night. So something to consider there after troops and support is time. How much time do we have on location? All right. So what's local time presently? What's Zulu time? How much time do we have? How much time does the enemy have? That's going to be major factors in the conduct of operations here in mission planning. Local time is self-explanatory. This is the time on target right now. Day, night, etc. Zulu time. Zulu, Z-U-L-U, is an international time used by like aviation and marine and maritime forces, so that if you're, let's say, an entire time zone or 2 or 3 time zones away, but you're capable of having assets on target within a matter of minutes or even an hour or so, you can develop a strike package for Zulu time and have that support arrive at a prescribed time for those ground forces, right? So not really going to get too much into that right now. That's maybe something for a later date and time. So terrain and weather. For terrain, we're going to use the acronym OACOC. And OACOC stands for Obstacles, Avenues of Approach, Key Terrain, Observation, and Fields of Fire, Cover, and Concealment. So this is what obstacles the enemy could be using to block your avenue of approach, or what you could use to block theirs. And then, of course, avenues of approach, we're looking at humans, like animals, prefer to take the path of least resistance. Unfortunately, due to Murphy's Law, that path is often mined. So we need to figure out what the best avenue of approach for our course of action is going to be during that time. Key terrain could be hills, valley, ridges, saddles. It could be lakes, streams, etc. Let's say if you control an inlet to a tributary to a river and the enemy can't push troops and supplies up that river, that's a key piece of terrain for you, right? Hilltops or mountaintops could be a key piece of terrain because they provide you observation and fields of fire, which is our next couple of words in that acronym. So if we can observe the target from a long distance and provide accurate fire on them, then we can have the advantage there. Cover and concealment. I like to think of cover and concealment like this, okay? I can hide in a cardboard box, but it's not going to provide me any cover from bullets, right? I can hide behind a Jersey barrier, but it's not going to provide me any concealment against, like drones or anything from the sides or whatever. Like, I'm not going to be able to hide very well. I might have ample cover, but I can't hide. Now, if I get into a triple canopy jungle underneath a bunch of logs and a hole in a cave somewhere, I have maximum cover and concealment at that point. So all these things are going to go into determining the terrain. And then as far as weather, that's going to be the forecast for today, tomorrow, the next few days down the road for your area of operations or area of responsibility. Now, if it's going to rain, it's going to monsoon, it's going to pour down for like 3 months. That could affect your troops. It could affect the enemy, etc. Civil considerations. A lot of people don't pay very much attention to civil considerations, or at least in the military. They want to just shorten the acronym to METT, but it's really METT-TC. Okay, and the reason for that METT-TC is civilians can positively or negatively determine the outcome of your mission, and that could be at the tactical, operational, or strategic level of warfare. Our troops fought in Afghanistan for 20 years, and we ended up having to hand the entire country back over to the Taliban. I'm not trying to get into politics on that, whether we won, whether we lost, etc. But just the fact that civilians helped to determine that outcome goes to show that you should never discount civilian considerations in your area of operations. They could impact you positively or negatively. We had the French resistance during World War II that helped us a little bit. And, we had some guys in Vietnam that helped our long-range reconnaissance dudes out. We also had enemy forces in Vietnam that fought against us wearing black pajamas with AK-47s and, impacted us psychologically. So civilian considerations are highly important depending on whether or not they're sympathetic to your cause. So never discount that. It's one of the most important things on the board, in my personal opinion, especially since we are mostly just American citizens, right? So, a lot of us don't have that full backing of the U.S. government and, millions of dollars in equipment and the whole military industrial complex behind us. So with all of this being said, why do we use METT-TC? Well, we use METT-TC to determine our position of advantage when it comes to planning for combat, okay, or planning for operations. So I've got this nice little scale for the position of advantage for METT-TC. And on one side, we've got friendly forces, and on the other side, we've got enemy forces. So we're going to ask our question, are we in a position of advantage, yes or no, every time that we go down the METT-TC process, okay? So that could be even for the salute report or OACOC, we're going to ask that same question, are we in a position of advantage, yes or no? And if the answer is no, the scales are tipped towards the enemy. If the answer is yes, the scales are tipped in our favor, and that's great. So why do we do all this? How do we determine all this, right? So a position of advantage is when factors of METT-TC favor you and or friendly forces. And what do we need to do? We need to put those factors in our favor. We need to stack the deck for us against the enemy, because that's going to determine whether or not we're successful at the end of the day. Like if the enemy has night vision and we don't, well, maybe we need to attack during the day. If the enemy is in a ravine and we have the hillsides, we can provide fire down on top of them from that position of advantage on the hill. there's a lot of different things that go into developing that plan of action, okay? But in the end, you have to stack the deck, stack everything over here in your favor to be successful, okay? So now we're going to go into a practical application example, and hopefully this is the last time I have to make this video today, because I've already redrawn this like 4 times. So get my handy dandy markers here. So our example is going to be what I affectionately refer to as the Battle of Hoosier Creek. And the reason I call it that is because my friend Rick Williams, that I met out in Missouri at a One Shepherd Warrior Leader Institute, called it that after our first day of Warrior Basic course, where we had a force-on-force exercise. So we had the enemy up here, this Lieutenant Bolam's unit. It was a squad-sized element. And then down here, we have my squad. I was a squad leader. I can't remember. I think I had another gentleman, Bill Manchak, as my assistant leader at the time, down here in this section. So we had both divided up our teams into 2 fire teams. So it was 1 squad, 2 fire teams. Unbeknownst to me at the time, the enemy pushed units on both sides of the creek, right? So they're bum rushing up while we're still trying to get a plan of action together. And our mission at the time for METT-TC was to take the creek. So we had split up into 2 teams, but we were doing bounding overwatch on the other side of the creek. So we got Alpha and Bravo, and then as we're bouncing up, so bouncing up, set, bounce up, set. The enemy's bum rushing down. And that's when we ran into contact. So we run into contact right about here on both sides. The first contact that we took was on the right when we saw movement. So we shifted and we start putting fire on over here. And then these guys caught up and we shifted and put fire over here too. So we're basically splitting fire. We got Alpha team, Bravo team engaged from both sides of the creek. And I was worried that the enemy was going to push down here and attack us from the sides while these guys are attacking from this side and maybe push out a pincher. And then we would be effectively surrounded and decimated because our forces were equal. You never want to go up against an equal force at any given time in combat. That's a great way to die. So I had to use the OODA loop, which is observe, orient, decide, and act, and METT-TC to determine my next course of action. So what I did was I had Bravo team pull back and cover us, and then Alpha team pull back to cover them, and then we leapfrogged back into here. I think we lost maybe 1 or 2 guys the whole time doing that. And we set in a blocking position here and a defensive position here, right? So we had fields of fire right here. We can cover everything coming through the creek there. And we had fields of fire here so that we could cover all of this, right? And of course there's thick foliage all along the creek and everything too. So we used the terrain to our advantage at that point by pulling our guys back. Well, we were being pursued by the enemy. So they pop smoke. They've got a big wall of smoke here. There were guys coming down into the creek here, and there was billows of smoke coming through here too. But since we were set in, anybody that came through here got shot. Anybody that punched through the smoke, punched their silhouette through that smoke, also got shot. So we expended a lot of ammunition down here defending this area because the mission was to take the creek at all costs. The enemy was an equal-sized unit. We were outnumbered, so we needed to use the terrain to our advantage. The terrain, of course, was this creek. And at the time, we had a limited amount of time to do this because the instructors wanted to do 2 iterations of the force-on-force exercise within just a few hours before lunch. So my plan of action was we get in here, we set in like ticks, and we take the creek. Worst case scenario, it ends up in a draw and no side wins. Best case scenario, we're in the creek, we kill everybody, we win, right? So we used the terrain and the time to our advantage at that point. We didn't really have to worry about weather or civilian considerations at that point because this was a training exercise and it was a relatively nice day. It was kind of hot, but it was all good, you know? So, the bottom line was we got in here, we blasted everybody over here that came around the corner. We blasted everybody that came through here and tried to punch through the thicket because we had ample cover and concealment there. And the whole time, I had a few dudes with weapon malfunctions. I had to fix weapons malfunctions. I had to direct dudes. At one point, I ended up handing a guy my rifle to use while I fixed his stuff. My instructor at the very end of this said, hey, there's two types of leaders out there. There's foxes and there's wolves, right? And he said, and you guys are a bunch of foxes. You want to run away and hide and, do this and that and whatever. Well, I had already lost the initiative because they bum rushed up, as fast as I could to get up here while we were trying to get set. And I just decided, you know what? We're just going to do the smart thing and pull back in here and use this to our advantage. So, ideally, I would have punched a couple of guys out to flank and maneuver and attack, and then maybe we would all envelope these dudes and take them out. But time didn't allot for that. I think it was a pretty successful mission for the most part, but it was more of a learning experience than anything. It's the first time I ever had a squad at my command, and I had to lead them accordingly. So it was a pretty nice little field training exercise. I learned to use METT-TC and the OODA loop to decide and act and implement a course of action there. So hopefully you can use this example for your development of the METT-TC process in the future when you get involved in situations like that, if you get into a situation like that. So why did I make this video today, and why is METT-TC important to the common citizen? Well, there's a few different things that you can utilize METT-TC for. As a citizen, it's going to be home defense and civil defense. So home invasion or active shooter situation. For the paramilitary side of things, for the militia or the National Guard or something like that, you're looking at domestic warfare, recon, surveillance, defense, raids, assaults or attacks, security, stability operations, ambushes, etc. All these things are going to be the bread and butter of what the average man can accomplish with the right gear, the right team, the right mission planning, and the right attitude. And the big reason for this is mission dictates equipment, right? So depending on the troops and support or the friendly units, the equipment that we have available, that's going to determine the mission that we're capable of doing, right? So if we don't have proper equipment, if we don't have friendly forces at our behest, we can't do the thing, right? So depending on the mission, we might need different equipment. I had a guy on my last video comment, and he said, choosing a chest rig over a plate carrier is stupid. You should always have body armor and combat and this and that. They're using body armor in the trenches in Ukraine right now for snipers even. And, to that I replied, well, it's METT-TC dependent, okay? And I don't think the dude really understood what METT-TC was or why it was important to equipment. But if you can only afford a chest rig and a rifle, then buy a chest rig and a rifle. If you can afford $1,500 worth of body armor and plates and night vision and all this other stuff, which is going to put you at a lot more than $1,500. I did the math, and I think it was like $15,000 for all the equipment that I have access to and have had over the past few years. to be almost equal to the average infantryman. Okay? And that's not counting training. Training is one of the most important things that you can have as a citizen, because the United States government can, train these 18, 19-year-old kids, spend, $5,000 on them to send them to MEPS and send them to boot camp, and then spend an additional $10,000 to $15,000, setting up their equipment, issuing them weapons, $20,000 for the training for an entire year or whatever to feed them and house them and stuff like that. And that's not even counting pay. Okay. So you, as an American citizen, might not be able to afford to do all the same things that these guys are doing. And I know the military is a lot of, we're mopping floors, we're, cleaning glass today, whatever, but they're doing it full time. They're doing field training all the time. The infantry guys are. They're out there putting in the work. But it's really hard for us as fathers and husbands and, family men who have to provide for a family to go out there and get that kind of stuff, right? So if all you can afford is a rifle and a chest rig and maybe some training, that's better than spending all your money, putting all your eggs in one basket on a rifle. All right? You can spend $1,000 on a rifle, or you can spend $1,500 on a rifle, or you can spend $2,000, $3,000, $4,000, $5,000 on a single rifle. But you could be putting that money into training and ammunition, getting out there and actually putting the stuff into use, learning all this stuff, right? The whole reason that I'm doing this type of video and these types of videos in the future is to bring everybody else up to the same level of training that I am. Because when the chips are down, you're not going to rise to the occasion. You're going to fall to the lowest level of training that you've got, right? And I think that since the mission dictates the equipment, you should have the equipment and the training first before you even think about going out there and doing any kind of missions, okay? You can have a plate carrier and maybe a cheap little PSA rifle or something like that and think you're going to go out and, fight a NATO death squad. But the bottom line is you're going to die. You're going to be a loot drop if you don't have any kind of training. If you've never fought against a near-peer unit before in a force-on-force environment, then you're not going to survive. You're going to end up in a pile of bodies, pushed into a shallow grave by a bulldozer, like so many in Ukraine have been. That's what's going to happen. And you need to understand that, okay? You need to understand that all this stuff is serious and that your life is attached to every piece of kit that you buy. It's attached to every friendly unit or friendly contact you make. It's attached to every piece of training that you get out there and get, right? So if you're not training, if you're not buying equipment, using that equipment, if you're not making contacts and networking, you're wrong. So I didn't want to get all, philosophical and weird on you in the last portion of this, short little METT-TC video. But these are all things you need to consider. You need to absolutely put everything into a position of advantage for you, right? That includes training and equipment and making friends. Get off YouTube and get outside. Like, I've been out here trying to make this video for like 3 hours, trying to do everything perfectly. And it's kind of hard work putting everything down and trying to go through everything in order. But I do it for you so that you can have this level of training that I've had to pay for and spend time trying to perfect. So, all that being said, get out there, get some training, touch some grass, make some friends, and last of all, live free or die.